And look at chapter 7 just quickly. We're right in the middle of the flood. Now there's two schools of thought on this, and I brought out one school of thought. I want to bring out another one tonight. All flesh destroyed upon the earth. Destroyed means obliterated, gone. There is another school of thought that there were a lot of animals, the elephants and things like that, that were actually dead and floating on the water. And we'll kind of look at that when the raven gets into the picture. And then the reason that their bones have not been found is because of all the sediment that was piled up, because that's when you get the new mountains were formed, when the water was going off the face of the earth, and you have the new mountains and the new continents and things like that. The earth changes. So there's two schools of thoughts there, but the one school of thought you need to keep in mind is that nothing survived except Noah and his family. And if you look in verse 11 of chapter 7, it says, "The same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven opened." All the fountains of the great deep. At the bottom of the ocean, you have volcanoes at the bottom of the ocean. Y'all remember when did St. Helens erupt? 82 or 83?
I don't remember that.
It was I know you're not old as it. I think it was early 81 or 82. I've done some research on that today, talking about the fountains being broken up, or the fountains coming up. When the world began to flood, it was not a gradual, like when you're filling up your bathtub, you can gradually see the water. I think more or less it was a tsunami effect of water coming up, coming down, and just one volcano. If this was the fountains or the volcanoes, bringing up the water, in verse 11, in 1983, let's say 83, when Mount St. Helens erupted, there was a 280-mile radius where all the trees and all plant life was destroyed because of one volcano.
And that was a small volcano.
Oh yeah, that was not a major volcano. They said that plant life was gone from that area for years because of all the ash and soot that had fallen. And like Kenneth said, that was not a major volcano. And on this, when you're dealing with such a massive scale of this earth, floating in space, this massive scale of all of this water descending upon the earth, Mount Ararat at that time was the highest known mountain to the Hebrews, is 17,000 feet high. It covered Mount Ararat. So all you have out in space now is this giant ball of water. That's what the earth was made out of. Back then, it's just water. Everything else is gone. Everything else was underwater. And of all this water everywhere, you have this little boat or this little ark with 8 people on it floating. That's it. I got a friend of mine that when he first joined the Marines, he had to do some stuff on ship. This has been 25 years ago. And he said, why? Because he said, you hear people that go on cruises and stuff, they get out in the middle of the ocean, they don't see anything, there's no land. He said, when you get out in the middle of the Atlantic, he said, Chris, you could go for days and there's nothing, and days and there's nothing, and days and nothing. Imagine, but he says, but that they're out there somewhere, eventually you will see land. For Noah, for 1 year, nothing. It's over a year. Actually, it's 371 days he stayed on that ark. Nothing. Could you imagine? God working patience with him. I know that when it comes an ice storm around here, and we're stuck in the house, just 4 of us, by that 3rd day, I'm like, it's better start melting or there's going to be some tragedy in this house. I can't take it. But just imagine how God is working patience with Noah, working patience with his family. He's got all these animals there, and the whole time God is with him. And there is a key words in chapter 8. God remembered. That's amazing. It does not mean in chapter 8, verse 1, that God thought Noah. Forgot all about him. It does. What the Hebrew mean, when God remembers in Hebrews, it means to turn attention to. God did not forget about him, leaving him on that ark floating around for over a year. And I'm sure Noah, being human, and we know how much human he is, because the first thing he does when he gets off the ark is what? Gets drunk. So he's not a perfect individual. I'm sure at times Mrs. Noah, Ham, Shem, Japheth, and Mrs. Ham, Shem, and Japheth probably at one time thought, when are we going to get off this thing? That's just human nature. But it is a beautiful words that God said that when he wrote this, it says God remembered Noah, did not forget about him. Out there in this big ball of water, and we have this boat that is floating around, and it's 450 feet long, God still turns his attention now from judgment to grace and to mercy. For the last several days, 40 days, 40 nights, God has focused solely on judgment, cleansing the earth, ridding the earth of this. And what is amazing to me is that although God, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, did not rid the earth of sin, he still had 8 people on a boat that were sinful people. He did not rid the world of sin. And when the water goes down, Noah and Mrs. Noah come off the boat, the next thing you hear of, Tower of Babel. God comes down and has to confuse their language. Sin has always been something that we have to deal with. Although God flooded it out, killed everything except those 8 people, yet sin still remained. And it's still like that today, and it will still be like that until God totally wipes it out. But it says, God remembered Noah and every living thing. And it says, and all the cattle was with him in the ark. You'll notice God brought the rain. God brought the animals to the ark. God closed the door of the ark. And God is going to be the one to cause the rain to dissipate off the earth, or the water. Because it says God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. Now I want you to look. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were, guess what? Stopped. For 40 days and 40 nights. We often hear it just kept raining from above, but guess where water was coming up from also? From beneath. So you have it coming from the top, coming from the bottom. God's judgment is finally going to stop. And it says, and the rain from heaven was restrained. That is like God put his hands up and said, okay, you're done. All right? And the waters returned from the earth continually. And after the end of 150 days, the waters were abated. It finally stops doing anything. And now you're floating. There's no more rain. You have a wind that's coming on the earth. And now they're just kind of out there on their own with God. But God does not forget about them. God still remembers them. And I'm sure, like I said, there was a few times that Noah probably thought, well, he forgot all about us. Here we are out in the middle of this boat, in the middle of this water, and what are we going to do? We'll have to start eating animals or something. Something's got to give. And God finally stops the rain. He restrains it. He stops the fountains. And now the wind is coming. And the water is slowly going to start coming off of the earth. And the ark rested in the 7th month of the 7th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat. And people have always tried to find 3 or 4 objects of God. They've always tried to find the cross, pieces of the cross. They've always tried to find the Ark of the Covenant. They're always trying to find the Ark or the crown of thorns. I don't have to see those things to believe they existed. I know they existed. I don't have somebody does not have to climb Mount Ararat and say, yeah, it's up there for me to believe. I believe it's up there. God put it there, it's there. Now, it would be interesting for somebody to find it and excavate and look, but still, I believe God put that in there in verse 4 to let people know this is where I put it. You know, and I know it's there. Is it still there? I don't know. But that's where God put it. And He puts it, what is interesting, at that time on one of the highest places on the earth. Okay? So it finally comes to rest. They stop floating. And the waters decreased continually all the time until the 10th month, until the 10th month. In the 10th month, of the first day of the month, and the tops of the mountains were seen. Finally. All right? There was I was watching a documentary about Moby Dick, which is based on a true story. And and some of these guys had written their memoirs or their journals or whatever, and they was floating on that boat after that whale had crashed it. And they said the greatest thing that they'd ever had witnessed was looking out and seeing just a little speck of land, knowing that that was going to be their safety. Could you imagine being in this ark with all of these animals? And finally it comes to rest and you stop moving, and all of a sudden you start seeing land. You see God's grace. He is finally going to allow you to see His work and to see His wonders. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. It's interesting, at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made. It didn't open until then, did it? Not until he was able to see safety. Someplace that he was going to be able to put his feet on dry ground. He's going to open those windows. Now this is what is interesting. If you'll look, if you want to one day, find out what they could and could not eat. If you'll go to Leviticus chapter 11, you'll find out everything the Jews could and could not eat back there in the Old Testament. And even in the New Testament, parts of it. There is one thing that is mentioned, and it is the raven. It tells us that they are not allowed to eat that. They are not allowed to eat a raven. Why are they not allowed to eat it? Because He said it's an abomination. Why? Well, they feed off carcasses. A carcass is something that's dead. That is why they cannot eat this. Do we eat stuff that's dead or alive? Dead. As like I said 3 or 4 weeks ago, God does not have to give you a reason to do something or to do not do something. He says it, that's it. But this is where you will find out what is clean and what is unclean. He brings an unclean animal up into the ark, and he's going to have a raven, and he is going to have a dove. All right, now, when we was talking about earlier about giant things that have been dead floating upon the earth, let's see what it says. And he sent forth a raven. What color is a raven? Black. What color is sin? All right. He sent forth a raven which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up off the earth. Did it come back? Okay, can a raven continuously move back and forth and continuously fly without stopping? They've got to stop every now and then, don't they? There's 2 schools of thought that he either landed on top of one of those mountains and rested, or he found a big fat something floating on the water and just landed there and thought, man, I got a smorgasbord here. I'm just going to stay right here and eat. That's the type of the world, isn't it? The ark is a type of safety, right? It is a type of salvation, a way out of judgment. Guess where a raven does not go back to? He does not go back to salvation or to that ark or to that safety. He finds himself out into the world symbolically and finds out this is where I want to be and I want to stay here. He's kind of like Demas. We find in the New Testament in 2 Timothy. He made his way back and out in the world. He thought, this is where I want to be. I'm not going back with Paul. This is where I like it. So that raven is a type of somebody leaving the presence of God. Because where was God this whole time? He was with Noah. Who shut the door of the ark? God. God was in there with Noah. God was there. But this raven, not having anything, I'm just going to go out and find a big fat elephant floating around. I'm just going to land on him and eat till I can content, and then I'll be happy. So it's gone. This black raven's gone. Never sees it again. So he takes a dove. What color is a dove? It's white. It is a clean bird. they could use these type of birds for sacrifices. If you were a woman, I believe Mary actually did this. I think she might have had used sparrows or doves. But if you were poor, you were allowed to, if you could not afford a lamb or an oxen or anything like that, you were allowed to sacrifice or to buy a dove. Those was poor people's sacrifices. And I believe that's actually what Mary used when she sacrificed after Jesus Christ was born. So he is going to send forth something that is white, something that is pure. A dove is a bird of peace. He sends forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated off the face of the earth. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her feet. And guess what she does? She comes back to God, doesn't she? She comes back into the ark. She comes back to safety, to salvation, to where she knows she is going to be safe. For the waters were on the face of the whole earth, and then he put his hand, took her, and pulled her in to the ark. Noah there is a type of Christ, if you believe in typology. Noah there, it says that when she returned, who put forth his hand and brought her into the ark? Noah. You remember when Peter was walking upon the water and he started to drown, he said, "Save me." What did Jesus Christ do? Reached down and did what, Janice? Poured him up. Just like what Noah does with the dove, he sees it coming and pulls him back in. That dove is a type of us coming back to God or coming to God. It is a type of that prodigal son that gets out into the world, comes back. Guess what the prodigal son's dad did? Reached out, brought him in, gave him shoes, gave him a ring, gave him a robe, killed a fatted calf at a party. So that dove is a type of us. It is a type of somebody coming back to the ark, coming back to safety. She returned unto the ark, for the waters were not abated. He put forth his hand, took her, pulled her in. He didn't leave her on the windowsill and say, "Okay, you can stay out here. I'm going to pull you into safety. I'm going to pull you out of this world where that raven is happy and satisfied. I'm going to pull you in." That's a beautiful picture of God's grace and how God works. And he stayed yet another 7 days. And he sent forth the dove out of the ark again. And the dove came unto him that evening. And lo, in her mouth was, guess what? An olive leaf. Is a picture of peace. Plucked off. Okay, this was not an olive leaf that was floating on the water. It was broken off of a olive tree. Now, where had all the olive trees been for the last several days? Underwater. Do you know that the olive tree is the only tree that can survive underwater for over 100 days? Mm-hmm. It's the only tree. The only tree that can survive underwater without being uprooted and without anything harming it. But you remember, if something is underwater for so long, eventually the roots are going to rot and it's going to die. The olive tree is the only tree that can survive underwater. And it was an olive tree. And breaks it, plucks it off. And this is what is amazing. When Noah sends out the raven for the first time, doesn't come back. It's like, well, that stinks. Send out a dove. Dove comes back. He's looking and looking. The dove doesn't have anything in his mouth. It's not good news, is it? Do you know what the excitement that Noah and his family have when they look and they see that dove coming and it lands and in its mouth is a olive branch, olive leaf? That's good news. Do you know what this Bible is to us? It's good news, isn't it? That dove is like a preacher or an evangelist or somebody that goes out and tells the good news. That's what that dove is. And I mean, we don't get excited over leaves, do we? But could you imagine when that dove landed, that olive leaf is good news, just like what this Bible is to us. That's what the gospel is. It's good news. And it says, and it plucked it off, it broke it off, and Noah knew that the waters were abated off the earth. And he stayed yet. Patience. You got to be a little bit more patient. And he stayed yet another 7 days. And he sent forth the dove, which returned not again anymore. And it came to pass, 600. And it came to pass in the 600th and first year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up off the face of the earth. Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face was on the face of the what? Dry ground. Finally. I guarantee you, Noah was one of those people that if his wife was cooking supper and she said 5 more minutes, he probably said, hey, I can wait. I can wait. We've been tried and tested. I stayed in the ark for 371 days. I can wait 5 more minutes. See how his patience is? And this is what is amazing. He removed the covering off the ark. You had a covering of the Ark of the Covenant. You know what was inside that Ark of the Covenant? Test your Bible trivia.
Several things.
10 Commandments.
The
Rod of Aaron.
and some manna.
And some manna. Those was all symbolic of God. Something of God. And when they were in God or Noah removing that covering is letting, just like that was saved inside of that ark, those people were saved inside of that ark. And he removed it. And he removed the covering. And on the 2nd month, in the 7th and 20th day, the earth was dried. Finally. Now, when Noah gets onto the ark, before it rains, you got grass, flowers, you got neighbors, houses, you got roads, you've got all kinds of animals, you've got green things. When he steps off that ark, it's a totally different world, isn't it? They are the only people on earth. 8 people. That's it. Talk about an odd feeling. This whole entire earth is 8 people, and God saved them. When they step off that ark, everything's totally changed, isn't it? I'm sure the land was stripped away. I'm sure that their surroundings was not familiar. But when they step off the ark, I want you to look. God spake unto Moses, this is what he says, go forth of the ark, thou, thy wife, thy sons, and thy son's wife with thee. You're not going to get time to rest. Okay? Once you get off that ark, you have to do something. All right? You've ever noticed with Noah, there's no time for rest at all. And it says, I'm trying to hurry through this, bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee, of the flesh, the fowl, the cattle, the creeping, they that breed abundantly in the earth, be fruitful, multiply on the earth. And Noah went forth, he and his sons, his wife, his sons, and his wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, every fowl, whatsoever creepeth upon the earth after its kind, went forth out of the ark. They did not stay, did they? What did Jesus Christ tell the disciples to do? Go forth. God tells Noah to go forth, be fruitful, and multiply. Okay? Now, and Noah, the first thing he does is going to build an altar. Let me go back and see this. He just tells them to go forth and multiply, don't he? But Noah decides he's going to build an altar. Because that is what those seven pairs is for, to sacrifice unto God. So the first thing he's going to do is he is going to build an altar unto the Lord. And he took every clean beast of every clean fowl and offered burnt offerings on the altar. The very first thing that Noah does is he is going to worship and he is going to praise God. And Noah and the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not curse the ground anymore for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Wait a minute. I thought he just got rid of sin. But he's still saying that even in man's heart now, you've got Noah, Mrs. Noah, and his kids. Is sin still in their hearts? Still there, isn't it? He says, imagination in man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. Now, up until this time, everything was perfect. All right, as far as your climate and as far as your atmosphere. But while the earth remaineth seed time and harvest, and cold and heat and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. That is your beginning of seasons. See how everything has changed now. Before then, it was just pleasant 73 degrees, I guess, every day. But now is when you start getting your seasons in. All right? Now is when you start knowing what time to plant. All right? Why do we plant our gardens in spring? Because we're told to in verse 22, seed time and harvest. That is when your seasons start to take place. So even God is the beginning of everything. He began this earth, wiped it out, and then began it again. One day, He is going to wipe it out, and He is going to begin a new heaven and a new earth. Okay? Now, I wanted to kind of get through that chapter because we was not here last Wednesday night. Let me look at chapter 9. You remember in verse 8, chapter 8, verse 1, God remembered him, right? But now we get in verse 1, chapter 9, God is going to bless him. God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, you'll notice this is not the first time He said, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. We are here because of 8 people. So in reality, all of us are kinfolks. In reality, we are. If we could, well, we can trace our heritage all the way back to chapter 9, verse 1. We all come from this guy. All of us originate from a drunk sailor, Noah. Kind of puts us on a level playing field, don't it? Everybody, the president, kings, queens, aristocrat, everybody, all descends back to 8 people. Noah, Ham, Shem, Japheth. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. We're going to start this thing all over. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air upon that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Do we have domain over the animal kingdom? Yes. It tells us that they should fear us. We are over them now. We are not equal to the animals. The animals are not equal to us. All right? Every moving thing. Before this, everybody was vegetarians. We are not told about eating meat up until now. Adam and Eve, vegetarians. Seth and Cain, all the way up. You just ate vegetables, I guess. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. That is where we become meat eaters. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. Now look. But flesh with the life thereof, which is blood thereof, shall you not eat. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof. That is an Old Testament Mosaic law. Can't eat blood. Okay? Shall you not eat. Now, that is when you start getting into the Mosaic law. Sometimes the majority of it is found, all of it is found in Leviticus. But he starts off with it in verse 4. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast I will require it. And at the hand of every man's, and at the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood. Now, do you remember when we talked about dispensations? Dispensation means to pour out. Okay? There's some people that believe dispensational. There's some people that's covenant. I'm dispensational. All right? I believe that God set up different type of dispensations on how you deal with sin. You remember the dispensation it was called the dispensation of ignorance. Adam and Eve, they didn't know any sin. They was ignorant to it. This is the dispensation of government. God tells, and I'll print you out a dispensational list next week. Who is God putting in charge of judge and jury and hangman? I want to read it one more time. And surely your blood of your lives I will require. At the hand of every beast I will require. At the hand of every man, at the hand of every man's brother I require man's life. Whosoever sheddeth man's blood by man shall his blood be shed. For the image of God made he man. You know who's in charge of all government now? One person, Noah. That's that dispensation. Okay? Dispensation of human government. Then we'll you later get into dispensation of law and stuff like that. But he is telling Noah, if somebody sheds somebody else's blood, you're going to be responsible for the execution. It's going to be required of them. If I go out and kill Paul, if I lived back then, I had to give my life for it. Noah is going to be, God's handing him the keys to this. And it says, and ye, again, be fruitful and multiply. Why does he keep hammering that home? Have you noticed that? The more people that are on the face of the earth, the more people that are allowed to worship God. Do you know why we're here? Essentially, to worship God. Okay? And it says, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. Have a bunch of kids. We've got to replenish this thing. We've got to start all over. Is it not amazing that for 8 people, now we're billions of people on the earth? And it says, and God spake unto Noah and to his sons, and said, and behold, I will establish my covenant or promise with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, the cattle, the beast of the earth, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by what? Floods. How is he going to destroy the earth next time? With fire. Destroyed it first with water. Now next time he's going to destroy it with fire. Neither shall there be any more flood to destroy the earth. Is it not amazing how God keeps his promises? That word covenant basically is just the word promise. That's all it is. I promise I will not do this. I promise I will not do this. God promises Noah, I'm not going to flood the earth anymore. Has he kept his promise? 6,000 years he's kept it, hasn't he? And he says, and God said, this is a token of my covenant, which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for a perpetual generations. What is he going to put in the sky? A bow in the cloud, and it shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. God is the same at this God right here. In chapter 9, chapter 8, when God remembered, and then God blessed, and then God promised. That same God is the same God we serve today. He has not changed. Who's changed? We have. We're the ones that change. God does not change. There's no need for him to change. We are the ones that have changed. That is like salvation. God does not change in order for us to be saved. He changes us in order to be saved. We cannot go before a holy, perfect God sinful. He changes us to allow us to come to him. Just like with Joseph. When he was brought up out of that prison, did they allow him to go see Pharaoh dirty? What did they do before he went to the Pharaoh? Cleaned him up. Then he was presented to God. You would think, well, why didn't Pharaoh change for Joseph? Because Pharaoh was king. God does not change. We're the ones that change. And it's amazing to me, out of everything that involved in our lives and how everything changes from day to day, God's still the same. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. He says, I'm going to remember, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and every living creature, flesh. The water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow, there's that covenant, or there's that promise again. That's what a covenant is. It's basically a promise. In the clouds, and I will look upon it, and I will look upon it that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all the flesh of the earth. And God said to Noah, this is my token of the covenant, which I have established between me and all flesh upon the earth. This is interesting. I want you to notice we're going to stop. And the sons of Noah are Ham, Shem, Japheth. Ham is the father of Canaan. And these are the 3 sons of Noah. In them was the whole earth overspread. Those are 3 people. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you and we thank you that call them covenant, call them promises, you keep them. God, we want to thank you that you made a promise one day that if you seek, you shall find. But God, you made a promise that come unto me. God, you made a promise that one day you're coming back. Dear God, we love you because you first loved us. Dear God, 2018 for some people has not started out great, but you're still God and you still keep your promises. We love you and we thank you, dear God. In your name we pray. Amen. Do you know who the first person